Hello, good afternoon. My name is Officer Rodriguez. I'm with the Las Cruces Police Department's Community Outreach Unit. With us today, we have Officer Kane, who's been a police officer for 12 years. And we also have Officer Smith, who's been with our police department for approximately 5 years as well. So all three of us are members of our Community Outreach Unit. In today's topic, we're going to be discussing response to active shooter or a mass casualty incident. All right, so one of the reasons why we have Officer Smith here is he's also certified as a paramedic as well. And he's going to be able to elaborate on a few different tactics and equipment that you can purchase yourself or that you can expect for the police department or fire department to have that you can use in these type of incidents. All right, so we're not going to get into specific details about incidents that have happened in the past, but we're going to try to do our best to summarize what you can do and how you can better prepare for an incident like this. All right, so in this particular case, there's a couple of things we're going to touch on. We're going to explain what is a active shooter incident, what is a mass casualty incident. All right, so a lot of people tend to think that active shooter incidents are only people when they use firearms and they try to kill or hurt as many people as possible. And that's not necessarily the case. So there's a lot of things that could happen in these incidents, and Officer Kane's going to walk us through a few and explain a little bit better.
So more of a definition of active shooters, an individual or group actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. In most cases, active shooters use firearms, and there's no pattern or method to the selection of victims. Active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. Because active shooter situations are often within 10 to 15 minutes before law enforcement arrives on scene, individuals must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with mass casualty incidents.
So one of the things to keep in mind here, if you notice, it says most of these incidents are actually typically over before law enforcement arrive. So what does that tell you, as a general public, is you have to start thinking about incidents like this now. And unfortunately, that's just the world that we live in, where we need to have these conversations. We need to start preparing for it now, not necessarily when these incidents take place, right? So they're unpredictable. They're very quick and it can happen anywhere. We've seen it happen at schools, we've seen this happen at convenience stores, we've seen it happen movie theaters, you name it. It could happen anywhere. All right, so it's not necessarily that most of the time they're targeting a certain population. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make their cause known, or they're trying to be remembered. So during this presentation, you're not going to hear us mention any names. To be completely honest, we're not here to remember these individuals that carried out these attacks. We're doing this as a way to prevent any injuries or deaths, because the truth is, and the sad thing is, when these incidents happen, we're expecting to have deaths in these incidents, right? So we're trying to minimize the number of casualties per se. And I can tell you, here as the police department, we definitely do our best to train for these incidents. And we're going to elaborate a little bit more throughout our presentation on what can you expect from us as the Las Cruces Police Department, the Las Cruces Fire Department, and how we've worked together to prepare for these incidents.
So we'll go over a couple of the methods of the run, hide, fight, and I'll go over those with you.
So we're going to be presenting a video here shortly. This video is Run, Hide, Fight. This is a video that gets put out by the FBI. It's a very good video. It's going to elaborate a little bit more on what does Run, Hide, Fight mean. After the video, we're also going to break it down a little bit further, and we're going to try to explain it to where it makes sense to you, where how can you apply it in your scenario, in your situation. So we're going to go ahead and play the video. Again, this is provided by the FBI. It can also be found on their website as well.
Hi, can I get you started with drinks?
Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta take this.
We'll need a minute.
No, I'm good. Stop.
Hey, you need to back up. You can't be here anymore. Get out of my face, man. You think I'm afraid of you? Get off, man. 911, there's a clip.
black shirt. Empty hands up, follow their instructions.
I'm in the direct line of fire if I head for either exit, but I have other options to help me survive. Guys, come on, in here. Come on. Go, go, go. Lock and barricade the door.
Both my exits are blocked by the shooter. I gotta stay hidden. I'm no victim. I'm ready for this.
He's applying direct pressure to the wound to stop the bleeding until we can find a tourniquet. In the meantime, turn off your phones and make a plan to defend yourself.
We have to fight to survive. If you control the weapon, you control the shooter. I'll go for the gun. He'll go for his arms. The bartender will go for the head.
Where is he?
We got him right here. Stay down.
Please, show me your hands!
Over here.
You can survive a mass shooting if you're prepared. Remember, run, hide, or fight. Run. Wherever you go, be aware of alternate exits. Quickly and cautiously evacuate in a direction away from the attacker. Don't hesitate. Seconds matter. Remember windows and emergency exits. Leave belongings behind. Keep your empty hands raised and clearly visible when exiting a building. Follow all instructions from the police. Don't stop until you're sure you've reached a safe location. Hide. If there is no safe escape route, find a good hiding place. Lock and barricade the door. Silence cell phones. Prepare a defense plan. Fight. Fight only as a last resort. Use available objects as improvised weapons. Use teamwork and surprise. A coordinated ambush can incapacitate an attacker. You're fighting for your life. Don't fight fair. Stop the bleed. A victim can die of uncontrolled blood loss in 5 minutes or less. Apply pressure or a tourniquet to control severe bleeding. Go to fbi.gov/survive to learn more.
All right, perfect. So a couple things, obviously that's a really good video. Again, this is something that you can pull up on the FBI's website as well. If you want to use this video for training in your school, your facility, your business, whatever it is, if this is something you want to show to your family, this is available online as well. All right. One of the things to keep in mind is this is a great video that helps illustrate a couple of different things. What does run, hide, fight mean? All right. So we're going to do our best to kind of break it down. We're still going to go through each one. We encourage you, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. We do have staff here that's going to help us. All your questions, we're going to do our best to answer all questions that get asked. So please, we encourage you. I know this is not a fun topic to talk about, but it is a conversation that we need to have, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to prepare the community a little bit better. We want the community to understand what they can expect from us so that we can help save the number of people or that are hurt, or just minimize the number of deaths or injuries.
So as far as run goes, what that means is if you're able to run and get to a safe area, do it, run. Try to avoid leaving the area on your vehicle. Every officer will be responding to a traffic jam can delay this response. So a lot of officers are gonna be responding to this, even multiple agencies. There's gonna be a lot of emergency vehicle traffic. So you wanna eliminate causing more of a traffic jam for them, in regards to the response. Try to find some sort of cover, once you feel like you've gone far enough. So what that basically means is go somewhere where you can go safely. If you have to break out a window, if you have to, even put yourself in kind of a bad spot temporarily to get to a safer spot. If you hear maybe gunshots in the distance or wherever it may be willing to go a little further to get away from that dangerous area.
One of the things that happens a lot is, let's say you're in a work environment and you hear that something sounds like a gunshot, right? Don't necessarily try to justify or downplay the situation. If you feel that that is what you heard, we want you guys to act on it. What we've seen before is maybe we get told by a staff member, somebody who's present says, hey, I heard what sounded like a gunshot, but I thought it was somebody who dropped something. And at that point, if you don't act and you don't respond to that, you're falling behind, right? So you want to do your best to stay on top of it. If you feel like you hear something or you believe something is happening, please call 911 and let us know what is happening. All right. So one of the questions that we get asked sometimes is, what if I call and I make a report of an active shooter situation or an incident like this, and it turns out to be nothing? All right. It is our job as police officers to respond, and it's our job to investigate so that we can make sure that it's not happening, or if it is, we need to address it. So as long as you truly feel that this is what's happening and you are acting in good faith, you're not going to get in trouble for calling and making us aware of something that could potentially be happening. All right, so just to kind of go back and elaborate on this, Officer Kane, it says here, try to find some sort of cover once you feel like you've gone far enough. What can you elaborate a little bit more on that? What is far enough?
I mean, far enough, if you think about it, don't try to overcomplicate it. Is if you're in an area, it's considered a danger zone or a hot zone, or wherever it may be, somewhere it's not safe for you to be. If someone's, maybe the suspect's close by, or somewhere where you can actually get far enough away from them, even behind a wall, in another area where you can barricade the door. You want to try to give yourself another option instead of just sitting where you're at. Running gets you away from the problem, and you can do it safely. That's what it means. So,
okay. And one of the things to keep in mind, just kind of going back to this, is a lot of the times when we teach at facilities, it could be a daycare or a school where there's staff members that are in charge of kids. All right. And we know how fun that can be, right? If just trying to get 1 or 2 kids to listen to you is hard. Imagine trying to take care of 15 kids, or just in general, trying to get them to do something when an incident like this is happening. It's going to be very stressful. It's going to be hard. So this is why it's best to start planning now, because in these incidents, if it's happening, you're only going to run if you're able to. Because if you hear the sound of gunfire or anything else further down from you, that means that, yes, you should probably run. We don't want you to stay there. We'll catch up with you later. We'll eventually find you. An investigation like this normally is probably going to take hours, if not days, to truly complete. So if you run into the desert area, you run somewhere where you feel is far enough, we're eventually going to find you. We're going to get a statement from you. We're going to get all your information. Obviously, you can call 911, let us know where you're at, notice what's happening, because at this point, you're going to be our eyes and ears. We need somebody there who's telling us what's happening. Now, what happens if, let's say staff member is in charge of at a daycare, right? And they hear something happening. Do you think somebody like a staff member would get in trouble if they were to toss a boy or a girl over a fence and they accidentally break their arm, or they get some scratches, bumps, bruises? What would happen to that person?
No, I think it's based on the situation. I know as a parent, I would be a lot better with the fact they tried to help my kid get away from the situation that could potentially end their life. So I think everybody should have the same conclusion, is that as long as they're trying to do what they can to keep that kid safe from gunfire or whatever, a suspect that's trying to hurt people actively, that's not something you should worry about. What your concern should be is to get to a safer spot to protect life from what's going on, and try to help the people around you.
And again, if you're acting in good faith and you feel like you're truly doing what's best for yourself and others, you're more than likely you're not necessarily going to get in trouble. You're not going to put yourself in a situation where somebody can come back and try to sue you or something like that, right? You're acting in good faith. So the other thing to keep in mind is, if you can, try to take other people with you, right? So let's say I'm in a room in this building here, and I'm trying to leave, and I'm trying to take Officer Kane with me. And Officer Kane says, no, I can't go. I'm going to stay here. Should I stay here and keep begging Officer Kane to go with me? Or should I just say, I got to go, right? Because at this point, I have to do what's best for me. I have to go home to my family. I'm definitely going to try to do my best to get him and anybody else to follow me, but I can't stick around and try to convince him. You got to get going. All right.
So as far as hide goes, if it's not safe for you to attempt to evacuate the facility, we kind of talked over that a little bit, then hide. This is the next option or something to keep in your toolbox to understand another option you could do in this situation. In most cases, you should know the facility better than the suspect. So if it's your kid's school, or say it's like a grocery store you frequently go to, most places we go for the most part are frequent visited areas, gas stations, places that we kind of have a general idea of the layout of the business. So you'll have a better idea for the most part if it's somewhere you frequently travel. Try to conceal yourself as best as possible and wait for law enforcement or an opportunity to run. So those are two options within hide, that obviously concealing yourself, placing yourself in a separate room and barricade the door, even hiding behind something that where you can't be seen. It doesn't have to necessarily be in a separate room. You have to kind of weigh out your options and what's safe to do in that moment. Or again, wait in one area for a chance to run and get away and go to a safer spot. During this time, just remember to begin to prepare a plan either to evacuate or to fight. So in the moment of hide, it's not just go and hide and just wait it out, hope for the best. In that moment, your mind should be thinking of, okay, if this happens, then I'm going to do this. Just creating options for yourself within that moment. If you want to speak anything else more on that. Or...
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we see a lot, and it happens, it could be on something very simple. It could be on a car accident. What happens is they call their uncle, grandma, grandpa, sister, brother. They call so many other people before they actually call 911 to report it, right? So in this incident, I understand it's going to be a scary situation, something that all of us hope it never happens to us, right? But if you find yourself in this situation, you're going to be our eyes and ears. We need you to call 911, and we're going to elaborate a little bit later on in the presentation as to what information is important to us. What do we need to know right there and then? Because you got to understand, in a situation like this, every available officer is going to be responding, right? So if we have a lot of information that can help us, that's going to help cater the way we approach this incident. All right. So again, just please feel free to you need to give us a call so that you can let us know what's happening at that location. Now, Officer Kane said it right, like, don't be a victim. In this incident, you don't want to just hide and hope that nothing happens to you. The person or persons that is carrying out this attack, they already made up their mind, right? They're there. And the sad part is, unfortunately, if an individual were to kill somebody and they kill 5 people today, and another individual ends up killing 30 people tomorrow, who's going to be on the news, right? It's going to be the person who has the highest kill count or who hurt the most people. Now, what happens if a daycare gets attacked and now we're dealing about, let's say 15, 20 children, then that's going to be all over the news, social media and everywhere, right? So it's about, these individuals don't necessarily care about whether you're a good person or not. They're really just trying to make their motive known. They want to get all the attention that they can. So don't be a victim. Please, if you find yourself in this situation, start looking around, start saying, what can I do to arm myself? If I do get found, what am I going to do when this person comes through the door? And in the video, I believe you guys got a chance to see a little bit better where people start arming themselves. They came up with a plan. If this is what happens, this is what we're going to do. And we want that. It's not always going to happen. We want somebody to step up. If you're in a group or in an environment where there's a lot of people, step up and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We need to pick a plan so that if it does happen, we can react to it a little bit better. Now, one of the questions that we get asked often is, well, what would be the best place for me to be in a room, right? And there's a lot of things that you can do. So for example, in a room, if you're dealing with somebody who's armed with a weapon, a firearm, if somebody were to make entry into that one room and you're in the very far back corner, there's that distance between you and that individual. So you truly can't do a whole lot to defend yourself because now there's that distance, right? And if he's armed with a firearm, obviously he's gonna be able to discharge his firearm, and he's gonna cause either great bodily harm, or he's gonna eventually kill more people. So we want you to put yourself in a position to where if this person does make entry into the room, you're in a position where you can attack this individual and do your best, because at the end of the day, you have to go home to your family. You have to go back to your loved ones. And again, these incidents are going to probably begin and end before we even get there. So this is the reason why this conversation is very important, so that you can start planning ahead. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is this only applies if, let's say we're in this room and all of a sudden we hear gunfire or any type of indication that tells us that the bad guy or the bad girl is right outside our door. At that point, maybe I don't have the option to run. I'm forced to stay in here. In the video, you got a chance to see where it says, hey, both exits are, I think they were barricaded or they were locked. And yeah, you couldn't, right? You can't go anywhere. So at that point, you're forced to hide, but you're creating a plan. Now, what happens if you can't lock your door? What are some examples that I guess you can give to the public? How can they better prepare if they can't lock their door from the inside?
They can't lock it. So if you're in a room, you can't lock the door. Think of improvised ways. So there's maybe a couch, some heavy type of furniture, bookcase, whatever it may be, something that's heavy you can place in front of that to be a barricade between you and the bad guy.
Yeah.
Every room has stuff in it. It could be a chair, it could be a table. You just have to start when you get into that room. It's part of the planning phase of thinking about, as soon as I walk in that room, if this person comes in here, this is the stuff I can immediately place in front of that door to put a barricade between me and them.
So pile stuff up if you can, right? So make it harder for this person to get to you, and again, prepare. So in this particular incident, we're going to switch over to fight.
So in almost every active shooter event, the suspect does not have a plan to walk out of the scene alive. So what does that mean? That basically means that they've chose exactly what they want to do. And they know because of what they're doing, there's a good indication they're not going to walk out of that scene alive, because they're causing, again, great bodily harm to other people or killing other people. There's a good chance that the good guy with the gun is going to show up, or maybe someone on scene is going to take over and their life could be ended at any point. So they're going to try to cause as much harm as possible during that incident. So if you're one of the victims or the people that are on scene that are part of this, you need to be willing to do anything possible to survive. I mean, and when I say anything, that means anything possible. So you have to think about it in that moment. You're not dealing with someone that's committing a property crime. This person their intention is to kill other people or to harm other people. So anything that's possible to get home to your families and see them at the end of the day. And by doing that, you can use anything like I talked about, anything, an improvised tool of any sort, use anything around you. So some examples we gave were scissors, pens, fire extinguishers. I mean, these are a lot of things that are probably at schools. More than likely, these are supplies in offices, businesses. These are examples of things that are very frequently around and close by where we can grab. But it could be anything.
Yeah, and normally when we do these presentations and we speak to the public and different businesses, what happens is we get told, hey, well, we're not allowed to carry firearms here. We have rules, policies that don't allow us to carry a firearm. We get that. You know, at the end of the day, you do have to abide by the rules and policies that your employer has. But maybe there's other weapons such as this, or maybe you're a baseball fanatic and you are able to have a baseball mounted on your wall. You know, it could be used in that case. There's different things that you can use. So this is where we're going to challenge you. We're going to challenge you to go back to these facilities where you work, where maybe you visit often, and you need to start thinking, if I were to run, what direction am I going to go in? If I can't run, where am I going to hide? What would be a good place for it? And what weapons or items could I use as a weapon to defend myself? You know, and definitely don't fight fair. We got a chance to listen to that in the video. At the end of the day, you have to be able to do and be willing to do what it takes to go home to your family. Obviously, sometimes when we do these presentations, a lot of the general public says, well, I'm okay with taking somebody's life if it means I get to go home to my family. That may be the case, but there's also a lot of people who don't feel comfortable with that, you know? So that's something that you need to start thinking about now is, if this were to happen, am I willing, am I capable? And if that's something that I'm willing to do. All right. So when it comes to running, I'm going to go back to it real quick. if let's say you're at a convenience store, would you get in trouble if you go into a room that says employees only?
So you have to think about in that moment, those moments, those areas are restricted for, just normal business day. Nothing's going on. People are shopping, doing whatever they are. Those are restricted areas during those moments. If there's a active shooter type incident or someone with a weapon or someone that's actively trying to cause harm to people in that moment, nobody's going to be mad at you. If anything, you're protecting yourself. You're doing that's part of what's necessary to survive. So that's the mindset you want to go in those situations. In the midst of that, think about any exits an option to me, any room is an option to me, behind the counter, places you normally wouldn't be accessible to the public or to you. In those moments, anything is a go to keep you safe. So
Let me ask you this. What happens if I'm in a room and my only exit is possibly breaking a window? Is that something that you can get in trouble for at that particular time?
in that moment, you have to think about, again, you can account for things later down the road, but in that moment, your life is key. Living and going past that moment and being alive and helping others stay alive. That's the moment that you need to be, understand more important in that. So a broken window can be fixed. Say someone's life you can't bring someone back. So I think that's what you need to understand, what's more important at that time.
All right. So we're going to go into calling 911. What happens if an incident like this does happen? What do we want to do? What is it? Some important information. So maybe in this particular case, Officer Smith, if you can kind of elaborate, maybe go over some of this information that the public's able to see, is what are some things that our central dispatch would love to hear at the beginning so that they can better provide information to us since we're responding?
Yeah. So when you call 911, you're gonna get a call taker. They're gonna ask you what the location of your emergency is. Even if you don't know the specific address, if it's say Albertsons or something, you just know it's Albertsons on El Paseo. Give that location. Be specific about where you are, as well as where the suspect in the incident or the last place you saw them, where that was, as well as how many people, what they're wearing. Be as detailed as you possibly can. Just knowing if you say that there's a male person with a darkened color shirt on, I mean, there could be 50 people that look like that. So any little detail, what kind of shoes they're wearing, shorts versus pants, hair color, hair style, anything like that. What kind of weapons, right? That dictates to some extent how we're going to respond. If it's a knife or like a blunt weapon, we're going to respond a little differently than if someone's in there with a tactical vest on and a loaded rifle. So those are important things that we need to know. And then as well as if you are safely able to, a rough number of people that are injured or at least down on the ground, and from what you can tell their extent of injury, whether that's, well, there's 50 people down and they're moving versus not moving, or if you can see detailed injuries, I mean, you can provide that as well, but at least a assessment of if they're moving or not.
One of the things that happens in situations like this, you can expect a ton of people to be calling the same number, right? So because of past incidents, we've learned that when people are calling 911, they say, man, I was on the phone forever. They weren't answering, they weren't picking up. Obviously, we only have a certain amount of call takers, we only have a certain amount of dispatchers. We're going to get to your call as quickly as we can. But in an incident like this, you're probably going to be on hold for a little bit, right? Be mindful and understand that even though they haven't necessarily picked up, it is a recorded line. So if there's information, anything that you can provide at that point, that can help us either right there in the moment or at a later time during our investigation, because this is going to be an investigation that, again, lasts hours, if not days. So it's very important to understand that in a time like this, there might be a while, or the phone might be ringing for a while, right? So we're getting asked a question is, if we are out in the county, what number do we call if there's an emergency?
I'll kind of talk a little bit about that. So you're still going to utilize 911. Our 911 system is developed to where it calls a dispatch center. And when dispatch gets the call, they're going to ask your location, and that's going to dictate which agency is going to respond. Out in the county, it's obviously going to be the Doñana County Sheriff's Department, but a law enforcement agency in that area from where you're calling the incident in will be the agency that's dispatched to that location. So still going to utilize 911 if it's an emergency. It's change.
Before we get too far ahead into this, again, Officer Smith is going to elaborate a little bit more on how to stop the bleed. We're not going to cover everything that could be done in an incident like this, but we're going to cover the main principles of the main things that you can do while we respond. All right. So before we get too far ahead, the incidents that we've talked about and how you can better prepare. Yes, the police department is able to go out and teach at your location. At the end of this presentation, we are going to have an email. You can definitely reach out to us and request that we go out to your facility and that we train. Part of what we do is we talk to the public. We're able to give a little bit more examples of what's happened in the past, what lessons we learned from those incidents. And again, just it's going to be a conversation just like we're having now. We encourage questions. We also do what's a threat assessment, so we can walk through your facility and give you suggestions on what can be done better, right? So, but again, please don't let that stop you from walking with your employees and saying, hey, what can we do better? You know, maybe this is an outward opening door. Maybe we should change it to an inward opening door. You know, the different things like that too, that you can start doing now, because there is a lot of doors that can be locked from the inside, but there's ways that you can defeat that, right? So it could be something as simple as maybe I'm going to take off my belt, I'm going to tie it around the door handle, and I'm going to pull on it in a certain direction to where it's harder for somebody to open that door. So there's a couple of different things that we could definitely suggest. And now we're going to cover a little bit more about how to stop the bleeding. And we're going to explain why it's important to know this. This can be applied in a number of scenarios. It could be applied in car accidents. Maybe there was an accident in your garage and you accidentally cut a finger off, or it could be anything, right? So it's very important, and Officer Smith is going to be able to elaborate a little bit more on this information.
So when we talk about stop the bleed, that's a term that's thrown around a lot. This display in particular is actually from the Stop the Bleed program, which is a great program. It was developed probably about 10 years ago at this point. And it's designed to bring to the general public medical skills that typically were reserved for emergency services and or the military. Mm-hmm. It's a free training. It's available online. Anyone can go and take it. It's fairly easy to become an instructor in, and then at that point you can give that training to members of your office as well. But the reason why we really push it and why we encourage this model in particular is because it talks about stopping bleed, which when we look at priority of life from a medical perspective covers M, which is massive hemorrhage. So when incidents like this occur, typically we're talking about penetrating trauma, things that are going to cause significant amounts of blood loss, and nothing will kill you quicker than injury or strike to one of the major arteries or veins in your body.
And we're actually going to go ahead and show you when Officer Smith is referring to arterial bleeds, we're going to go ahead and show you this. These are obviously the main ones, and he's going to be able to elaborate a little bit more on that.
So we look here, we have our brachial and our femoral arteries. Those are the two that run through our extremities and are the two that we're going to predominantly deal with when we're talking about injuries sustained from these types of incidents. Your femoral carries at a point in time about 25% of your blood volume. Can kill you, strike your femoral can kill you within about 2 minutes. Yeah.
And again, this is exactly why it's important to know. Well, we're going to talk here in a minute. We're going to talk about tourniquets in general, but like Officer Smith mentioned, I mean, this is something that where if you do suffer an injury where it does cause an arterial bleed, especially here in your femoral artery, it could potentially kill you in 2 minutes, right? So if this incident happens, by the time you call 911, By the time a call taker takes a call, gives it to a dispatcher notifies the police department. Now the police department has to respond and take care of the issue, right? Take care of these individuals that are carrying out this attack. I can almost tell you, even if we were right there at the same building, it'd be probably really difficult to stop this, right? So we're going to cover a little bit on what you can do to better prepare for that.
Correct. So the first thing, and I think Officer Rodriguez touched on a little bit, this is the time to be selfish. So if you're actively running, looking for a place to hide, and there is an injured person that is not you, unless you can safely and very quickly bring them with you, just unfortunately move through. Now, let's say you found a safe space to hide, right? Like in the video they show, they all get into a closet and then they realize that person is experiencing looks like blood loss to the arm. That is now the time that we're going to start looking at tourniquet use. So for today, we have a commercially available tourniquet in businesses, airports, major infrastructure points. Recently, it's become a trend. It's kind of like how people have AEDs to have stop the bleed kits. And it's basically just a backpack with tons and tons of tourniquets and some other things that are covered in the stop the bleed curriculum. If you have those, great. If not, we're going to be looking for an improvised tourniquet, which is not a belt. Specifically, when we're talking about improvised tourniquets, we're looking for something soft material, cloth, non-harsh cutting edges that's going to be about this in width. And then something, it can be preferably something a little more sturdy than a pencil, but if that's all you have, I mean, that's what you're going to have to try and work with. But it's called a windlass here. You're going to wrap that around and just twisting. So when we talk about arterial bleeding and we're trying to discern, do we need a tourniquet here? We're only talking about our limbs, right? So we can't really apply tourniquet anywhere outside the limbs. We're looking for large amounts of typically bright red blood. Usually it'll be quite literally spurting at about the same pace as someone's heartbeat. And when we look to apply that tourniquet, so let's say, see what I'm here. We want to avoid any joints. So, right, we can't put a tourniquet over a joint here. We cannot put a tourniquet up onto the shoulder. For whatever reason, we're trying to put something down here. We can't put a tourniquet over the wrist. So we need to aim for 2 inches above or below any of the joints. Typically in the police department, we train the moniker high and tight. You're never wrong. If you can get it about as close to up top here as possible, that's better than nothing. If you're in a presence of mind to go down here, go a little lower, maybe try to alleviate some of the risk.
So you're saying even if there's an injury, here, you can still apply a tourniquet here.
Correct. Yeah, it's going to stop all the blood flow. Like I said, if you have the presence of mind, the injury's down here, and you can safely secure it, 2 inches above the injury itself and 2 inches below the joint, great. If not, just remember, always go high and tight.
All right. So while Officer Smith prepares this is something, again, very small. You can definitely keep in your purse. You can keep it in your backpack, keep it in your car, your garage, at home. I personally, when I travel, I carry a bag with multiple tourniquets because they're fairly inexpensive. So a tourniquet like this can cost about $25, something you can buy through a couple different websites. Please don't buy the ones that are maybe $5 or so. You get what you pay for. So try to do a little bit more research. What could be a good tourniquet, right? So a cat tourniquet like this is normally going to be around $25. And we're going to explain about a SWAT T tourniquet a little bit later, which is almost like a giant rubber band. And that's maybe about $15 to $20 as well. So overall, they're fairly inexpensive. We're going to show you how quickly a tourniquet can be applied. And I mean, the success rate on this is just amazing. So this is something that you can apply to yourself. You can apply it to your leg. Again, we're going to look for extremities. So your arms and legs, something that you can apply to yourself, or you could have somebody apply it to you. Most businesses and facilities, like Officer Smith mentioned, they're purchasing these backpacks and multiple medical supplies so that if an incident does happen, because these incidents usually end before we get there, you're able to start going to work, you're able to start helping people. And that's what we're trying to do, is try to save as many lives as possible.
Just real quick before we do the tourniquet demonstration on the purchasing your own tourniquet. I just want to really reiterate that we need to be careful of the quality of tourniquet that we're buying. Do your research, find out what the brand names are of tourniquets. And don't just be buying the cheapest one off Amazon. There have been multiple incidents in kind of every facet of when you would need one of these, where people have used a cheap one that they bought offline without doing much research. It failed and ended up actually causing the death or doing more damage just because it was not properly made. So it's a growing thing. As we mentioned, more businesses are purchasing these. More people are trying to find ways to make money off of it, unfortunately. And so there's incidents like that. So when we're applying a tourniquet, right, for purposes of demonstration, we're gonna go high and tight. We're going to pull as hard as we can. Do as much of our homework as possible before. So I've secured the tourniquet at this point. How does your arm feel?
It's a little uncomfortable.
A little uncomfortable, right? Okay. So at this point, we take our windlass and we're going to give it a couple turns. We recommend 2 to 3 turns generally. Because this is an actual tourniquet, they're really only single use. I'm not going to crank it all the way down. But after those 2 or 3 turns, we want to take an assessment specifically on the arm. We're going to look at our wrist here, right by the thumb. Always make sure to use your 2 pointer and middle finger. Do not use your thumb because it has its own pulse. And we want to make sure that we cannot feel a pulse. If you're applying something with the leg, right kind of at the top of your foot, you can feel a pulse as well. So that's a good thing to check. Also, if the bleeding stops.
So the good rule of thumb is high and tight.
Correct.
Right. So again, if you have an injury here or here, high and tight, you're never wrong. Now, this is something, again, you can apply to yourself. Somebody can apply it to you. And it's just overall, it's a great tool. I can tell you, all of our officers have at least 1 tourniquet, but I will say probably all of our officers carry 2 or more. This is something that we generally do apply to the public, and then we train with them for very often, actually. But again, it's just one of those things where if you're going to go and actually purchase these items, make sure you train, make sure you educate yourself on them, because if you are in need and you need to apply it, that is not the time to learn, right? So do your research, watch some videos on how you can properly apply this. And yeah, I mean, this is definitely a life-saving tool.
Just to add to the tourniquet, so when it's applied, if they're yelling that it hurts, you're probably doing it correctly. As long as you attached it correctly, that's a good thing. In that moment, it's a lot better for it to be the pain to be pretty awful in that moment, but they're gonna be alive and they're not gonna lose a limb because you applied it correctly. So just understand, if they're saying it hurts, that's not necessarily an awful thing. You just want to make sure it's applied correctly.
All right, so now we're just going to show you a quick picture. It's going to show you the SWAT T tourniquet. Again, this is also something that could be purchased. Now, the SWAT T tourniquet, normally it's something that can be applied more for children or somebody who's has a bigger body, somebody who's maybe overweight, because this tourniquet here only extends to a certain length. And if you were to try to crank on this as well, it's probably not going to get tight enough to where you can squeeze a newborn's arm or leg, right? So in this case, this is a giant rubber band against the SWAT T tourniquet. The instructions will actually be on the tourniquet itself, right? So if for whatever reason, this is something that you're not too familiar with, you just got to rip open the package. The instructions are going to be on there. We're going to cover this. Now, the airway, if you don't have any of these tools and you do have somebody who's maybe unconscious, is not responding, this is something that could be done very quickly. This photo here shows you 4 different steps on how you can go ahead and put somebody in what we call a recovery position, right? So this is the best position you can put somebody when you're waiting for paramedics, officers, firefighters to respond. This is the best thing you can do to help them, because the last thing you want to do is put them facing up. This is the perfect position you want to do. So you want to tilt their head backwards and ensure that they're clear. Ensure clear airway and straighten head and neck. So at that point, you're going to place the arm at his side almost as if they're sleeping, right? They're tucking their arm in and the other arm across the chest. So when you pull them forward, you can actually pull on their hip. You can grab onto a pocket. You can grab onto their belt, the back of their knee, and you're going to bring the knee up to a 90-degree angle. What that's going to do, it's almost going to put the person in the position to like if they're sleeping, right? So if there is anything in their airway, it's going to help. Gravity's going to help us in this case, right? So it's going to spill out of their mouth, clear out their airway, and you want to roll the person towards you because it's going to be a little bit harder to push away from you. So it's normally easier to pull in. All right. And ensure the head is supported. So again, you're going to use their own arm almost in a way to where if they're sleeping.
And on that real quick, when we're talking about rolling them, we, when possible, want to try and always roll onto their right side. Their left side, because that's where your heart is located. And so especially when we're talking about situations where people are experiencing blood loss, whatever we can do to try and create as much pressure on the heart as possible so that it can continue pumping efficiently is always better.
All right, so just to kind of cover this, our police response, what can you expect from your local police department here? All right, so it is the Las Cruces Police Department's policy that every available officer or every officer in this case will respond to an incident where there's an active shooter or a mass casualty incident. So what that means is if I'm at a shoplifting call, I need to drop what I'm doing and I need to go help, right? In this particular case, the priority is we need to stop the active killing. We need to stop that from continuing. The sooner we get there and stop the thread, we're going to be able to get start rendering aid a lot quicker. So what this means is different agencies are going to respond. You're going to have state police, border patrol, the CM marshals, Doñana County Sheriff's Office. People are going to respond to help because again, we have the same goal. We need to stop the killing as quickly as possible. Now, yes, you are going to see different uniforms. You're going to see different police cars. You might see officers in plain clothes because again, everybody's going to do their best to help. And so you can expect a large presence of police officers. What this means also in the process, if you do hide and you're in a very good hiding spot, we will eventually find you. We're going to do, we have certain tactics and techniques that we're going to deploy so that we can go in and make sure that every room is clear. So if you feel like it's not safe staying there, we'll eventually find you. We're going to have plenty of officers that are going to be able to help us with this process, right? So again, like I mentioned, our number one priority is to stop the killing. We need to get in there as quickly as we can. So what does this mean, right? Does this mean that, let's say there's two people armed with a firearm inside this building and I'm the only officer that gets there? Should I wait for my backup or what do I do?
Again, our policy states, I mean, everything's changed since prior incidents have happened, is that as soon as we get that call for service and there's an active threat in that moment, whether you're by yourself or you're getting dispatched with multiple officers, which will be the case, but you may be the first one there. We're not gonna wait until some further damage happens. Again, the biggest priority is to eliminate suspect or to stop that situation from going further. So that one officer will go and enter the building or wherever it may be to engage the suspect to stop the threat.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, this is something that our officers swore to do, right? That we signed up for something like this. We need to make sure that we go in there, we stop the killing, regardless if we're outnumbered, regardless of what weapons they're using. It is our job, our priority. We signed up for this. And our job at this point is to stop the killing so that we can save as many lives. So what that means is, in an incident like this, if we do come into a building and we see multiple victims, people are screaming for help, trying to pull on our pants, say, hey, I need help, I need help. Unfortunately, we cannot stop and render aid at that point. The number one priority is we need to stop the active killing. We need to stop the threat. So if I were to stop and render aid and it takes me a minute, right? A minute to treat one person, how many times can somebody pull the trigger in 1 minute? So that's just something to think about, is that is the reason why we can't stop and render aid at that point. Obviously, with the numbers that we're going to be getting, we're going to do our best to come back and help, but that is not our priority at that point. Now, when we are entering, please keep your hands visible so that officers can see that you're not a threat to them. We're going to do our best to bypass as many people and get to where there is the sound of gunfire or something that guides us in a different direction. But listen to commands, should keep your hands visible so that we can see there's nothing in them. Once the threat or the active killing stops, right, our officers are going to transition to what we call rescue phase. So this is where our fire department, I mean, they're just great to work with. They're extremely brave. They've signed up. This is the picture illustrates one of our past trainings where they have equipment themselves to where they can go into what we call a warm zone. And that means that we haven't technically finished doing our job, but we understand that we have a job to do. We understand that we need to get people to help as quickly as we can so that we can save as many lives as possible. So this is where our firefighters, I mean, they're great to work with, and they're going into this environment knowing that potentially they could get hurt, but obviously we're doing our best. Officers are going to be with them to provide some sort of protection, but they have the equipment, they have the resources to start treating aid inside the building or wherever this is taking place, so that we can start getting them some sort of medical attention and then do our best to get them transported to a local hospital.
That's a good point, because I think a lot of people's concern is that, well, do we need to wait till the threat's completely eliminated? And this could be several minutes into it, hopefully not a long time, but again, we don't know the time limit. It could be a very long period of time, or it could be a few minutes. During that time, no, there's going to be a moment where, like I said, Officer Rodriguez explained, there's going to be a warm zone where if we have time, and it's safe to do so, we're going to bring people in, like our other first responders that come out with us, fire department, paramedics, that will escort in and provide security for them to escort victims out to give them treatment. So it's a good point.
All right, so just to summarize this again, our officers, it's the Los Cruz Police Department's policy that yes, regardless of what is happening, our officers are going to enter that facility, do our best to take care of the ongoing killing. And then as quickly as we can, we're going to transition to a rescue phase. And this is where we do joint training. We do our best to train not only our officers, but our firefighters. We train with them. We do our best to create a scenario where it is realistic so that if something like this does take place, it's not the first time we're seeing it. We know how to work well with each other. We know how to communicate with each other, which is going to provide a better result at the end. So what this means is the priority of life. Your life is, how can I say this? Let me go back, I apologize. So this triangle helps illustrate that in an incident like this, the number one priority is you, right? So the life of the innocents, then the second priority is going to be first responders, and then the suspect or suspects, right? So what this means is if I were to go into a facility where Officer Kane was injured, and we also have a couple of other civilians that are injured, my number one priority is to treat them. Unfortunately, Officer Kane, he has the training, he has the equipment, he knew what could potentially happen, right? And it's sad to say, because even though I care about him as much as I do, at the end of the day, we have to help them, right? They don't have any tools, they don't have any resources. So I need to do my best to render aid to them. As soon as I can, I'm going to quickly provide aid to him. And then eventually we're going to provide help to the suspect or suspects. Why? Because that person chose to carry out this attack. They chose to do this. And unfortunately, their life is not necessarily a priority at that point. Your life is more important, our first responders, and then we'll take care of him or her at a later time when it's feasible. So in a nutshell, what can you do now? So have that conversation with your employees, your team, your family members, have that discussion, create a plan. The reunification site, really what that means is if you do run out into the desert, if you do run into different areas, have a spot where you can say, hey, this is where we're going to come together again. This is one of those things where officers are going to get there. They're going to do our best to take charge, to lead not only the staff, but again, this is something where you guys need to have that conversation now. In the past, we've seen rosters. If it's a school facility, use your rosters to take roll once you do leave. And, because at a later time, we're going to have to go back and say, is everybody accounted for? And rosters, I mean, they're great resources, not only for you, but for us as well, going back at the end of our investigation. Transportation, I can tell you, we're going to get creative. So many people fit in an ambulance. So many people can fit in a police car. If we have to take a bus, if we have to take a truck, we're going to do our best at that point to get as many people to a local hospital as quickly as we can. But this is something that you can keep in mind is if this does happen, do I want to take my vehicle? And when we talked a little bit about that is we're going to create a traffic jam. Why? Because even though you're trying to leave that location at 100 miles an hour, the police department, firefighters, we're also trying to come in at 100 miles an hour, just trying to get to you guys as quickly as we can. So prepare, right? So medical equipment, we talked about simple CAT tourniquet. We also talked about a SWAT team tourniquet, things that you can purchase on your own. They are available to the public, and become familiar with the equipment that you're purchasing. Train, educate yourself with it, and identify weakness spots in your facility and how you can improve them. Again, this is something that we can do. We're going to provide an email here shortly where you can request the police department to go to your location and perform one of these trainings catered to you. And we could also help with what's called a threat assessment, right? So I think the biggest thing to take from this training and this topic is it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So we can honestly say this is something that is potentially going to happen in Las Cruces, right? And that's why we're doing our best to prepare for it. And we want you guys to be able to prepare for it as well too. So I know this is not a fun conversation to have, but it's definitely a conversation that we need to have because your life matters and we need to do our best so that we can not only save ourselves, but save as many people as possible. So just to kind of recap, please keep in mind, we're definitely doing our best as a police department to train for these type of incidents. And in this particular case, you know, we thank you for what you guys are doing. Obviously, the support's been amazing, but we just want you guys to continue getting better, training, thinking about ways that you can prepare for incidents like this. And again, something like this could come in handy in a car accident, or maybe there was an accident at home, you know, where you accidentally cut yourself, whatever it is. So thank you guys again. I will say our next Bridging the Batch will occur every last Tuesday of every month moving forward. So the next one we're looking at is June 25th. It's also going to be at 5:30 p.m. So again, every last Tuesday of every month at 5:30 p.m. So please tune in for the next one. We'll release the topic a little bit later. But thank you guys for your time. I hope this was helpful. And again, please feel free to request for our unit to go out there. We're going to provide that email here shortly. Thank you again.
Thank you guys.